I've got time. Ethan smiled like he truly meant it. Not the polite kind of smile people give when they're trying to be supportive. The real kind. The kind that says, whenever you're ready, I'm here. I wanted to tell him everything. About the notebook hidden in the kitchen drawer, about the so-called family investment agreement, about every wire transfer I'd ever sent without hearing so much as a thank you. But every time I tried to put those memories into words, they sounded unbelievable. Who would believe parents kept financial records on their own kids? Who would believe a father measured love with a calculator? So instead, I squeezed Ethan's hand. "One day," I whispered. He nodded. No pressure. That was one of the things I loved most about him. He never pushed. The following spring became one of the happiest seasons of my life. Work was going well. I had just been promoted to senior financial analyst, and for the first time, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. I finally replaced my 10-year-old Honda with a used SUV. Nothing flashy, just reliable. I even started putting money into savings instead of watching it disappear every month. Life finally felt stable. Then one Saturday afternoon, Ethan asked if I wanted to take a walk around Eagle Creek Park. It was one of our favorite places. The trees were just beginning to turn green, families were kayaking on the water, and kids chased ducks along the shoreline. Nothing about the day felt unusual, until Ethan suddenly stopped walking. "Hey," he said. "Yeah? Come here for a second." He led me onto a small wooden dock overlooking the lake. The breeze barely rippled the water. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. I laughed. "Please tell me that's not another granola bar." He grinned. "Nope." Instead, he pulled out a tiny navy blue box. My heart completely stopped. "You've become my favorite part of every single day. I've seen you work harder than anyone I know. I've watched you take care of people even when they didn't deserve it. And somehow, you still choose kindness." His voice cracked. "I don't want another adventure without you standing next to me." He opened the box. A simple oval diamond caught the afternoon sunlight. Not oversized, not flashy, just beautiful. "Will you marry me?" I don't even remember saying yes. I just remember crying, laughing, and wrapping my arms around him before he could even slide the ring onto my finger. A family walking by started clapping. Someone whistled. A little girl yelled, "She said yes!" It felt like something out of a movie. For one afternoon, life was perfect.
That evening, we called our families. Ethan's parents screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Linda immediately started talking about engagement dinners. Tom jokingly asked if he had enough time to learn a father of the groom dance. They were genuinely happy. Then I called home. Mom answered first. "Oh my goodness," she cried. "We're so excited." For a brief moment, I thought maybe this would bring everyone closer. Then Dad got on the phone. "When's the wedding?" "We're thinking next fall." "Good." His voice stayed oddly calm. "You'll both have good jobs by then." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Before I could respond, he added, "We should probably sit down soon and discuss the financial side of everything." I frowned. What financial side? You know, our contribution. The wording caught me off guard. Contribution? I hadn't asked for money. We're actually planning to pay for the wedding ourselves, I said. There was a pause, long enough to feel uncomfortable. Finally, Dad chuckled. Well, we'll talk about it later. Then he changed the subject. At the time, I convinced myself I was overthinking it. Maybe he simply wanted to help. Maybe this was his awkward way of offering support. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But over the next several months, he started asking strange questions. How much did the venue cost? How expensive was my dress? Was Ethan getting a bonus that year? Had we opened a joint bank account yet? Every conversation somehow drifted back to money. I told myself it was harmless. Dad had always been obsessed with finances. That was just who he was. What I didn't know was that while Ethan and I were planning the happiest day of our lives, my father was quietly planning something else. Something he believed would finally settle the score once and for all. And 3 months before the wedding, one unexpected phone call from my Aunt Diane would reveal that my parents had been telling the rest of the family a very different story about me. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I had just finished a client meeting when my phone buzzed. Aunt Diane. That alone surprised me. We usually talked on birthdays, holidays, or if somebody got married. Never on a random Wednesday. Hey, sweetheart, she said warmly. I just wanted to tell you how excited I am about the wedding. Thanks, Aunt Diane. I can't wait to see everyone. There was a brief pause. Then her tone changed. I've actually been meaning to ask you something. Sure. How's your dad doing with the business? I frowned. I think he's okay. Why? Oh. Another pause. He told everyone things have been pretty rough. I leaned back in my office chair. Rough? How? He said the lumberyard has been struggling for years. I blinked. That didn't sound right. Every time Dad called asking for money, he always blamed a different emergency. The roof, equipment, taxes, medical bills. Never once had he mentioned the business was failing. Then Aunt Diane said something that made my stomach drop. He also said you've been too busy with your career to really help out. Silence. I honestly thought I'd heard her wrong. I'm sorry. What? He said you don't come around much anymore. He said once you started making good money, you kind of forgot where you came from. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Forgot where I came from? I'd been sending thousands of dollars every few months. I'd emptied my savings more than once, skipped vacations, delayed buying a home, postponed replacing my old car, all because I kept helping them. And somehow, I was the selfish daughter? I forced myself to stay calm. What exactly did he tell everyone? Aunt Diane sighed. That he never wanted to complain, but parents eventually realize which children remember them and which ones move on. Those words hit harder than any insult ever could, because they weren't just lies. They were rewriting my entire life. After hanging up, I didn't cry. I did what accountants do. I opened my laptop, then I opened my spreadsheet. For the first time, I added a brand new tab. Conversations. Every phone call, every request, every transfer, every promise to pay me back someday. Then I added another section. Family statements. Date. Who said it? Exactly what they said.
No opinions, no emotions, just facts. Documentation had always made me feel safe. Facts don't change depending on who's telling the story. People do. That evening, I called my cousin Ben. We hadn't talked in months. After a little small talk, I casually asked, "So, what have you heard about me lately?" He laughed awkwardly. "You really want to know?" "I do." He hesitated. "Uncle Richard says you're doing great financially." "That's true. But he also says you're kind of distant now." Another punch. He says you're focused on climbing the corporate ladder, and that family doesn't seem as important anymore. I closed my eyes. "Anything else?" Ben sighed. "He mentioned they've had to struggle alone."
I thanked him for being honest. Then I ended the call. By midnight, I'd spoken to 4 relatives. Every single one had heard a version of the same story. Emma left. Emma got successful. Emma stopped helping. Emma forgot her family. Nobody knew about the transfers. Nobody knew about the emergency payments. Nobody knew I'd quietly been carrying a financial burden for years because my parents had never told them. Suddenly, everything made sense. Why relatives had become a little colder over the years. Why some cousins stopped inviting me to family gatherings. Why I always felt like I had to prove I wasn't selfish. Someone else had been writing my reputation behind my back, and I'd never even known there was another version of the story. Around 1 a.m, I scrolled to the very bottom of my banking history. Transfer after transfer, year after year. Then I whispered something to myself that I'd never admitted out loud before. I've been paying, and they're still painting me as the villain. For the first time, I stopped feeling guilty. Instead, I started asking questions. The biggest one was simple. If my parents truly believed I never helped, why did they keep asking me for money? The answer arrived less than a week later, when my father called asking for another $18,000. And that phone call became the first time in my life I almost said no. It was Friday afternoon. I had just wrapped up a long audit and was halfway through cleaning out my inbox when my phone buzzed. Dad calling. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. After my conversation with Aunt Diane, something inside me had shifted. I answered anyway. "Hey, Dad." He skipped the greetings. The forklift finally gave out. I blinked. "What?" "The one at the lumberyard. Transmission's shot, hydraulics are leaking. The mechanic says it's not worth fixing." "I'm sorry to hear that." "So we need another one." There it was. The pause. The part where I was expected to fill in the rest. "How much?" I asked. 18 grand. He said it as casually as if he were asking me to pick up milk on the way home. I leaned back in my chair. $18,000? It's a business expense. Dad, that's more than a business expense. It's an investment. That word again. Investment. Everything in his life eventually became an investment. Even people. "I don't have that kind of money sitting around," I replied. There was silence. Then he laughed. A short, dry laugh. "Emma, you're an accountant. You make good money. I know you've got savings." I looked out the window at the city skyline. Technically, he wasn't wrong. I did have savings. For the wedding. For a future house.
for emergencies that belonged to Ethan and me. Not for another crisis at the lumberyard.
I'm getting married in a few months, I reminded him. So? So we've got expenses too. His voice instantly became colder. When your family needs help, you help. I closed my eyes. For years, that sentence had always worked. It made me feel guilty, responsible, obligated. This time, it landed differently, because all I could hear was his voice from Thanksgiving. As long as she believes she's helping, she'll never stop. I took a slow breath. I can't send $18,000. Another long pause. How much can you send? Not can you, just how much? I rubbed my forehead. I could probably do $5,000. Even saying that out loud felt ridiculous. Most people would never dream of casually transferring $5,000. Yet somehow, I'd convinced myself it was reasonable. Dad didn't sound grateful. He sounded disappointed. I guess it'll have to do. The call ended. No goodbye, no thanks, nothing. That evening, Ethan found me sitting at our kitchen table staring at my laptop. You've been looking at that spreadsheet for 20 minutes. I know. He walked over, set 2 mugs of coffee on the table, and sat beside me. Want to tell me what's going on? For the first time, I did. Everything. The notebook, the agreement, the endless transfers, the phone calls, the conversations I'd overheard, the lies my relatives had been told. I expected disbelief. Instead, Ethan quietly listened. He didn't interrupt once. When I finally finished, he reached for my hand. Emma, you've given them how much? I've honestly lost track. Then let's find out. I turned the laptop toward us. Together, we started scrolling. Transfer after transfer. Year after year. The numbers just kept coming. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. Have you ever added it up? I shook my head. No. Why not? I guess I never wanted to know. He nodded slowly. I think it's time. Those words stayed with me. It was time. Not to argue, not to accuse, just to know the truth. So I highlighted every payment I'd ever recorded, clicked the sum formula, then hit enter. The total appeared instantly. I stared at the screen. My breathing stopped. My hand slowly. I covered my mouth. Ethan looked at the number, then looked back at me. Neither of us said a word, because the total sitting at the bottom of that spreadsheet explained everything. And the moment I read it, I realized something that completely changed the way I looked at my parents. If they ever tried to tell me I owed them for raising me, they had no idea. I'd already paid far more than they could ever ask for. I kept staring at the screen. The total didn't change. It didn't blink. It didn't apologize. It just sat there. $273,915.46. I whispered the number out loud. 273,000. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Holy. He stopped himself. I knew it would be a lot, Em, but not that much. Neither did I. For years, I'd only looked at each payment individually. 500 here, 3,000 there, a few hundred for a medical bill, a couple thousand for repairs. Separately, each one felt manageable. They looked like a second mortgage. I scrolled back to the first transfer. $500. Dad's truck. I remembered sending it during my lunch break, smiling because I thought I was helping. Then the second. Then the third. Soon, the screen became nothing but years of sacrifice. Canceled vacations. Delayed dreams. Savings accounts that never had a chance to grow. I wasn't looking at numbers anymore. I was looking at pieces of my life. Ethan finally broke the silence. Emma, has anyone in your family ever thanked you? I smiled without humor. Once. His eyebrows lifted. They texted, received. He looked at me for a long moment. I don't think that counts. I laughed. A tired laugh. No, I don't think it does either. The next morning, Ethan made pancakes while I sat at the kitchen island with my laptop open again. "You've been up since 6, he said. I couldn't sleep. You still thinking about the spreadsheet? I keep wondering if I missed something. What do you mean? I've spent years assuming I was helping because they truly needed it. I paused. But what if they didn't? That question had never crossed my mind before. Not seriously. Dad always sounded convincing. Roof repairs, equipment, medical emergencies, taxes. Every request came wrapped in urgency. What if urgency had become a habit? I opened my banking app, then another browser tab. One by one, I matched transfer dates against the stories I'd been told. Something caught my attention. The month Dad said business was barely surviving, the lumberyard's Facebook page had posted pictures of a brand new delivery truck. The month Mom said they couldn't afford property taxes, they'd uploaded vacation photos from a week at a lake resort. I frowned. That's strange. What? I turned the screen toward Ethan. They said they couldn't pay the roof contractor. He looked closer. So? This photo was posted 3 days later. The caption read, "Finally upgraded the showroom. Excited for customers to see the new display area." I kept digging. Another payment. Another excuse. Another social media post. A weekend getaway. A new riding lawnmower. Fresh landscaping around the store. None of those things were proof they'd lied. But together, they painted a picture that didn't match the desperate phone calls I'd been receiving. Ethan crossed his arms. I'm not saying they never needed help. Me neither. But he looked at the spreadsheet. They definitely weren't telling you the whole story. For the first time, I considered something I'd spent years refusing to believe. Maybe my parents weren't simply struggling. Maybe they'd gotten comfortable letting me carry part of their life. 3 weeks later, wedding planning shifted into high gear. Our venue was booked. Invitations had gone out. Linda insisted on hosting a small engagement dinner. Tom volunteered to build a wooden welcome sign by hand. Every time Ethan's parents offered to help, they asked the same question. What do you two want? Not once did they tell us what we owed. Not once did they make us feel guilty for accepting kindness. It felt normal. At least, I think it was normal. Then my dad called. His voice sounded unusually cheerful. Almost too cheerful. You got a minute? Sure. I've been thinking about the wedding. Okay. I've got a little surprise planned. I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I honestly thought maybe he wanted to make things right. What kind of surprise?
He chuckled. You'll see. Trust me, it's something nobody will ever forget. After we hung up, I smiled at Ethan. I think Dad's finally trying. Ethan smiled back, but something in his expression told me he wasn't nearly as convinced. And looking back now, I wish I'd trusted his instincts instead of my hope. Because while I was busy picking flowers, tasting wedding cake, and writing thank you cards, my father wasn't planning a celebration. He was planning a public performance. And the first person to accidentally uncover it was my little sister.
I wasn't expecting to hear from Lily. By that point, our conversations had become polite. Birthday texts, holiday messages, the occasional Happy Mother's Day reminder when she'd forget to call Mom herself. Nothing deep, nothing personal. So when my phone lit up with her name on a Tuesday night, I assumed she'd accidentally butt-dialed me. Instead, the moment I answered, she asked, "Are you alone?" I frowned. "Yeah? Why?" "I need to tell you something." Her voice was quieter than usual, almost nervous. That alone made my stomach tighten. "Lily, what's going on?" She hesitated. I wasn't supposed to hear it. Hear what? "I stopped by the lumber yard this afternoon." I waited. Dad and Mom were in the office. I was grabbing payroll paperwork. She took a slow breath, and I heard them talking about your wedding. I leaned forward in my chair. What were they saying? They've been working on something. What kind of something? I don't know exactly, but Dad kept saying.
She stopped. "Lily? What did he say?" "He said, everyone deserves to know how much we've sacrificed."
The room around me suddenly felt very quiet. What does that mean? I don't know, but Mom asked if the numbers were finished. Numbers. That word hit me immediately. Not flowers, not seating charts. Numbers. They've been printing stuff. Printing what? I couldn't see. Dad closed the folder before I walked in. A knot formed in my stomach. What kind of folder? One of those big manila envelopes. The same kind Dad always used for invoices at the lumberyard. I tried to laugh it off. I'm probably overthinking this. Maybe. Lily didn't sound convinced. But what? I've never seen Dad smile like that. Those words stayed with me long after we hung up. The following weekend, Ethan and I drove to my hometown to finalize a few wedding details. Mom insisted we stop by the house first. The minute we walked inside, she hugged Ethan. "So good to see you." Dad shook his hand. Future son. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Mom chatted about centerpieces. Dad complained about gas prices.
Lily barely spoke. Every few minutes, I'd catch her looking toward Dad like she wanted to say something. Then she'd quickly look away. After lunch, Dad asked Ethan if he'd help him carry a few boxes into the garage. The moment they walked outside, Lily grabbed my arm. "Come with me." She practically dragged me into the laundry room and shut the door. "What are you doing?" I whispered. She looked genuinely anxious. "I found this." She pulled a crumpled receipt out of her pocket. FedEx office. Large format printing. Heavy cardstock. Color copies. Binding services. I looked at the total. Almost $80. What's this? I found it in Dad's truck. When? Yesterday. What was he printing? I don't know. He snatched the folder before I could see. I stared at the receipt. Binding services? Dad never bound anything. Unless... My heart started beating faster. Lily,
Do you think this has something to do with the wedding? She shrugged. I honestly don't know. But whatever he's planning, he doesn't want anyone finding out before the reception. Before I could respond, we heard footsteps. Dad's voice echoed down the hallway. You girls hiding from us? Lily shoved the receipt back into her pocket. We both forced smiles. Just talking, she answered. Dad laughed. Well, save the secrets until after the wedding. Secrets. Funny choice of words. That evening, Ethan and I checked into a small hotel downtown instead of staying at my parents' house. As soon as the door closed behind us, he loosened his tie and looked at me. Something feels off. You notice too? He nodded. Your dad's acting... He searched for the right word. Excited. I laughed softly. My father hates weddings. Exactly. He sat beside me on the bed. That's why I'm worried. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Lily. Be careful.
Just 5 words. No explanation. No emoji. Nothing else. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. That was the moment I stopped believing my father's surprise was something good. I just didn't know how bad it was going to be. And less than 24 hours later, standing in the hotel lobby with a cup of coffee in one hand, I would accidentally overhear a conversation that confirmed every fear I had been trying to ignore. The wedding was only 2 days away. The hotel buzzed with guests checking in, kids running through the lobby, and relatives greeting each other like they hadn't seen one another in years. I couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs around 6:30 a.m. to grab coffee. Best decision I never meant to make. As I waited near the cafe counter, I heard my father's laugh. Not loud, just enough to catch my attention. He was standing around the corner near the business center with Mom. Neither of them noticed me. Between us sat a decorative wall covered with fake plants. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop until I heard my own name. Dad chuckled. She's gonna be completely blindsided. Mom sounded nervous. Gary, are you sure this is the right time? It's the perfect time. Everyone important will be there. I felt my grip tighten around the coffee cup. Mom lowered her voice. What if she gets upset? Dad laughed again. She won't. She owes us. Those words hit me like a punch. Owes us. He actually believed it. Mom sighed. I just don't want people thinking we're bad parents. Dad answered without missing a beat. They won't. They'll finally understand everything we've sacrificed. Then, I heard papers sliding across a table. Dad spoke proudly. I had FedEx print the final version yesterday. Final version. FedEx. The receipt Lily found. It all clicked. Mom asked quietly, Did you include everything? Every penny. Hospital bills, school clothes, food, utilities, Christmas presents, vacations, even college application fees. He actually laughed. I rounded a few numbers up. My heart skipped. Rounded them up? This wasn't a heartfelt speech. This was an invoice. A real one. I slowly stepped backward before either of them could see me. My coffee suddenly tasted like cardboard. I rode the elevator back to my room in complete silence. When I opened the door, Ethan looked up from his laptop.
You okay?
I closed the door, locked it, then looked him straight in the eyes. My dad is going to hand me a bill at our wedding. He blinked. What? I told him everything. Every word I'd overheard. Every sentence. By the time I finished, his jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitch. Absolutely not. I know. We're stopping this. I shook my head. No.
He looked confused. What do you mean, no? If we confront him now, he'll change the plan. He'll find another way. He'll corner us after dinner, or during photos, or at brunch. He wants an audience. I paused. So I'm gonna give him one. Ethan stared at me for several seconds.
Then, a slow smile crossed his face. Not because he thought any of this was funny, because he finally realized I already had a plan forming. I know that look, he said. That's your CPA face. I laughed for the first time all morning. My what? The face you make before someone gets professionally destroyed. The next 2 hours felt strangely calm. While bridesmaids talked about flowers and playlists, I sat quietly with my laptop. Every bank statement, every transfer, every receipt, every Venmo confirmation, every wire, every canceled check. If it involved money, I had it. Years of records. I'd never deleted anything. Good accountants don't throw away evidence. By lunchtime, my spreadsheet had grown to nearly 100 entries. I added one more column. Acknowledged. One by one, I checked every payment. Truck, roof, medical bills, store renovation, taxes, Lily's tuition, credit card payoff, equipment repairs, emergency loans. I reached the bottom. Every single line had the same answer. No. Not one thank you. Not one birthday card saying, "We appreciate everything you've done." Not one message asking if I could even afford it. Nothing. Just request after request. I leaned back in my chair. Then something occurred to me. Dad was preparing one invoice. Maybe I should prepare one too. Not out of revenge, not to embarrass him. Just to tell the whole story. I opened a brand new document. Across the top, I typed 3 simple words. Financial Summary Report. No dramatic title, no sarcasm, just facts. Because facts don't yell. Facts don't exaggerate. Facts simply stand there, waiting for someone brave enough to read them. I looked at Ethan. I need access to a printer. He smiled. I think this hotel has a business center downstairs. I picked up my laptop. Perfect. Neither of us realized it then, but that little printer tucked away beside the vending machines was about to produce the 10 pages that would completely flip my father's wedding surprise upside down. By the time I reached the hotel's business center, it was almost midnight. The hallway was quiet, except for the soft hum of the vending machines. The business center wasn't much more than a tiny room with 2 outdated computers, a printer that looked older than I was, and fluorescent lights that buzzed every few seconds. Perfect. No distractions, no curious relatives, just me and 8 years of receipts. I plugged in my flash drive and opened the spreadsheet. For a second, my finger hovered over the print button. This wasn't just paper.
This was proof. Every sacrifice, every transfer, every excuse I'd believed, every time I'd chosen my family over myself. I clicked print. The machine groaned like it had been asleep for years.
One page, then another, then another. The sound echoed through the empty hallway. When the last sheet slid into the tray, I stacked them carefully. 10 pages. Clean, neat, impossible to argue with. I flipped through them one last time. Monthly transfers, emergency payments, medical expenses, home repairs, business equipment, taxes, loans that somehow became gifts. Everything was there. At the very bottom sat one bold number: $273,915.46. I stared at it for a long moment. Funny thing about numbers, they don't care about feelings. They don't pick sides. They simply tell the truth. I slipped every page into a plain white envelope from the hotel front desk. No labels. No decorations, just an ordinary envelope. It looked almost harmless, exactly the way the truth usually does. When I walked back into our room, Ethan was still awake. He looked at the envelope. Done? I nodded. I hope I never have to use it. He smiled gently. So do I. I placed it inside my overnight bag, beside my wedding shoes. Then I looked at him. If things go sideways tomorrow, I need you to trust me. I always do. No matter what happens. He didn't hesitate. I've got you. Just 4 words. But somehow, they healed a part of me I didn't even know was broken. Wedding morning arrived with clear blue skies. The kind photographers pray for, the kind every bride hopes she'll get. I woke before my alarm, not because I was nervous, because my brain refused to slow down. Outside my window, guests were already walking toward the church. Inside the bridal suite, it was complete chaos. Hair dryers, makeup brushes, coffee cups everywhere. Someone couldn't find the bouquet. Someone else had lost an earring. My maid of honor, Jessica, walked in carrying 3 breakfast sandwiches. Ladies, nobody is getting married on an empty stomach. Everyone laughed. For a few minutes, everything felt wonderfully normal, exactly the way a wedding morning should feel. While everyone was distracted, I quietly picked up the white envelope from my bag. Jessica noticed. "What's that?" I smiled. "My backup plan." She laughed. "That sounds mysterious." "It is." "You gonna tell me?" "Not yet." She looked at me for a second, then simply nodded. "Whatever it is, I've got your back." I handed her the envelope. "If I ask for this during the reception, bring it to me. No questions? No questions." She tucked it inside her purse without opening it. That's when I realized something. The people who truly love you don't always need explanations. Sometimes trust is enough. The ceremony itself felt like stepping into another world. The church was glowing with stained glass light. Soft piano music filled the room. I saw Ethan standing at the altar. The second our eyes met, everything else disappeared. The fear, the spreadsheets, the envelope, even my parents. For those few minutes, it was just us. When my father walked me down the aisle, he smiled for every photograph. Guests probably thought we looked like the perfect father and daughter. Only I noticed him patting the inside pocket of his suit jacket every few steps, checking, making sure something was still there.
His envelope. I almost smiled, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the only person carrying receipts. And unlike him, mine told the entire story. The ceremony was beautiful. The vows were heartfelt. The applause felt endless. For one perfect hour, I almost believed the worst was behind us. But during cocktail hour, while guests laughed, clinked champagne glasses, and congratulated the newlyweds, I caught my father standing alone near the reception hall entrance. He wasn't talking to anyone. He wasn't eating. He wasn't celebrating. He simply reached inside his suit jacket, touched that manila envelope, and smiled to himself. That's when I knew. He wasn't waiting for the right moment to celebrate his daughter. He was waiting for the perfect moment to collect what he believed she owed. And, unfortunately for him, I had brought my own paperwork. The reception hall looked like something out of a magazine. White roses lined every table. Soft string lights stretched across the ceiling. The DJ was playing old-school soul music while guests found their seats. For a little while, I forgot everything. Ethan and I laughed through dinner. His dad told the same fishing story for the 100th time, somehow making it even funnier. Jessica nearly spilled her drink trying not to laugh. Even Lily looked relaxed. For one brief moment, it actually felt like a wedding, not a battlefield. Dinner ended. The cake was cut. People wandered toward the dance floor. The photographer pulled us aside for a few quick family pictures. As everyone gathered, I noticed Dad glance at the wall clock, then at the manila envelope tucked inside his jacket. He wasn't enjoying the reception. He was waiting for his cue. My stomach tightened. This was it. The DJ finished a song. Guests returned to their tables. Conversations filled the room. Then, clink. A fork tapped against a glass. Once, twice, 3 times. The room slowly quieted. Dad stood beside his chair with one hand resting on his water glass. He smiled confidently. If I could borrow everyone's attention for just a minute. The conversation stopped. About 150 faces turned toward him. He cleared his throat. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Emma and Ethan. Polite applause filled the room. He smiled. So many parents dream about seeing their children succeed. He looked directly at me. Watching Emma build a successful career has been one of the greatest investments of our lives. Investment. There it was again. I felt Ethan's hand gently squeeze mine beneath the table. Dad continued. People see successful adults, but they rarely think about what it costs to get them there. A few guests nodded politely. They still thought this was a heartfelt speech. It takes sacrifice. It takes money. It takes years of hard work. Another pause. I think parents deserve a little recognition for that. His smile widened. So today, I'd like to finally settle an old account. The room chuckled. They thought he was joking. I didn't. Dad reached into his jacket. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled out a large manila envelope. Exactly the one Lily had warned me about. Exactly the one I'd overheard him talking about. He walked toward our sweetheart table. Every step echoed through the room. The DJ looked confused. My mom kept her eyes fixed on the floor. Lily looked like she wanted to disappear. Dad stopped in front of me. Without saying another word, he placed the envelope beside my champagne glass. "You've done well for yourself," he smiled proudly. "So I think it's finally time we balance the books." The room laughed again. A few people even clapped. They still had no idea. I looked down at the envelope. Andrew Family Lumber. Official letterhead. Typed label, professional. Like he was delivering an invoice to a customer, not speaking to his daughter. Ethan leaned toward me. "You don't have to open it." I looked at him, then smiled softly. "Oh, I definitely do." I slid one finger beneath the flap. The paper inside was thick, freshly printed, exactly as I'd expected. I unfolded the document. Across the top, in bold letters, it read, "Statement of Family Investment." Beneath it, line after line. Hospital expenses, baby supplies, food, housing, school clothes, Christmas gifts, vacations, utilities, college application fees.
Every category had a dollar amount. Some were believable. Others were laughably inflated. Near the bottom, one bold number caught everyone's attention. Total due, $248,000. Payable upon financial independence. The room fell silent. Completely silent. Someone dropped a fork. It hit the floor with a sharp metallic clink. I slowly read the last line again, then looked up. Dad stood there smiling, waiting, confident, certain this was going exactly as he'd planned. He expected tears, maybe embarrassment, maybe even gratitude. Instead, I carefully folded the paper, set it back on the table, took a slow sip of water, then smiled. "That's interesting." Dad frowned slightly. "Interesting?" I nodded. "Very." I looked across the room, at my relatives, at Ethan's family, at coworkers, neighbors, old family friends. Every eye was on us. Then I turned toward Jessica. She immediately knew. Without me saying another word, she reached beneath her chair, pulled a plain white envelope from her purse, and quietly walked it over to me. Dad's smile faded. Just a little. I accepted the envelope, placed it gently beside his invoice, then looked him straight in the eyes. "You know, Dad, since we're sharing financial records tonight, I brought a few documents too." The entire room froze. And for the very first time that evening, my father looked nervous. Not scared. Not yet. Just uncertain. Like a poker player who suddenly realized the other person might actually have a better hand. The ballroom had gone so quiet, you could hear the ice melting in people's glasses. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. Even the waitstaff had stopped walking. Every eye bounced between the two envelopes sitting on the table. One manila, one white. Dad forced a smile. "Emma, I think you've made your point." I tilted my head. "I haven't even started." A nervous laugh came from somewhere near the back of the room. Then, silence again. I picked up his invoice, held it up just enough for the front tables to see. "You've listed nearly $250,000 as the cost of raising me." Dad nodded confidently. "That's correct." "Okay." I placed his invoice back on the table, then picked up my white envelope. Slowly, I removed the stack of papers. 10 pages, neatly stapled, professional, clean. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I was presenting facts, the same way I did every day at work. Across the first page, bold letters read, Financial Transfer Summary. Prepared by Emma Carter, CPA. A few guests leaned forward. I looked at the room. My father believes tonight is about money. So, let's talk about money. Dad shifted his weight. I could see the confidence beginning to crack.
I turned to the first page. On September 18th, 2018, I transferred $500 for my father's truck repairs. I flipped to the next line. November 12th, $1,000 for business inventory. Next page. February 3rd, $3,800 to help Lily replace her car. Lily slowly lowered her head. She looked like she wanted the floor to open beneath her. I continued. August 21st, $14,000 toward replacing the warehouse roof. Someone near the back quietly whispered, "What?" I kept reading. My father's knee surgery, store renovation, property taxes, equipment repairs, insurance premiums, credit card debt. Every payment, every date, every transfer. One after another. No drama, just facts. The room grew quieter with every page. Then I stopped. I looked toward my Aunt Diane. Dad told several family members I rarely helped. She looked stunned. "He told me that too," she whispered. "I know." I turned another page.
So I kept records. I held up the spreadsheet. I'm an accountant.
Keeping records is literally my job. A few people nodded. One of Ethan's coworkers quietly muttered, "Fair enough." That broke a little of the tension. Just enough. Then I reached the final page. The only page that really mattered. I took one slow breath. My father's invoice says I owe him $248,000. I paused. My records show something different. I turned the last page around. The bold total sat at the bottom. $273,915.46. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Actual gasps. Not one, several. Dad's face lost every bit of color. Mom looked down at her lap. She still hadn't said a single word. I calmly folded my hands. Over the past 8 years, I've transferred my parents $273,915.46. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody smiled. Because suddenly, this wasn't awkward. It was heartbreaking.
I looked back at Dad. So, if we're treating family like a business, your math doesn't work. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I continued. By your own numbers, I've already paid more than what you're asking. I picked up his invoice, then mine, held them side by side. The difference is $25,915. I let that number hang in the air, then smiled gently. So technically, you owe me. Someone in the back whispered, "No way." Another guest quietly said, "Holy crap." Dad slammed his hand against the table. The loud crack made several guests jump. "This isn't funny."
His voice echoed through the ballroom. You think you're smarter than everybody because you went to college? I didn't flinch. No, I just brought receipts. A few people couldn't hold back tiny laughs. Not because the situation was funny, but because the truth had landed so cleanly. Dad pointed toward me. We fed you. We clothed you.
We gave you everything. I finally stood. For the first time all evening, I looked him directly in the eyes. You gave me a childhood. That's what parents are supposed to do. It's not a loan. The room went completely silent again. Dad looked around the ballroom, searching for someone, anyone, to take his side. Instead, all he found were people quietly looking away. And that's when his confidence completely disappeared. Because for the first time in his life, the audience wasn't applauding him. They were questioning him. And what happened next would leave the entire reception speechless.